Okay, so I guess I'm gonna tune this down while I do this, right? I want to talk about Skinwalker Ranch, the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, as it was presented by the History Channel. Now, granted, these shows that are on the History Channel, you know, it's Finding Bigfoot. They never find Bigfoot, right? It's an all setup. It's all scripted. They have hundreds of cast, and crew taking photos and drones and all that. So, but Skinwalker Ranch is somewhat unique. And I say that with this in that it has been a mystery for decades, all the way back to the 1940s. And before that, there were reports. I mean, Skinwalker Ranch. Let me do something here real quick. Let's see. Let me switch over. Okay, here's Skinwalker. This is where I am. Let's do this. Skinwalker Ranch. All right, so that's from Austin, Texas, where I'm located, and we're going to Skinwalker Ranch. All right, here is Skinwalker Ranch. This is near the Ute National Forest. It's east of Salt Lake City. And it is, I wouldn't say it's scrub. I mean, it's on the precipice of a forest land, but it's in a very arid, dry valley. All right. And if you look at this, that's the main house. If you look at that, the main house, and then Skinwalker Ranch, you go down this way, you travel a little bit. I mean, we're talking about 500 acres or so. And here is Homestead 2, this area. And here's the other, I guess they call that Homestead 3, but Homestead 2 is this area. And if you look at that on the topographical map, there are a couple things that stand out to me about this ranch and about when Bruce Bigelow owned the ranch. There are a couple of features that stand out to me when you look at this on Google Earth. This is the area where they dug a hole, filled it with water, put dye in it, and then tried to trace the water, if you will. But you'll notice there are a couple of features here. This one here, you recognize that, all right? This is an enclosure. This is a security. They actually had security here, and there's cameras here to watch. They would put cattle or livestock in this area and watch it. That was on the western side of Homestead 2, and on the eastern side of Homestead 2, let's see, where is that other place? It's a similar setup right here. The same thing. It is a compound with security cameras. They had security guards, and they had livestock in here to watch. And this is the pasture, the larger pasture. And then over here is what they call home base. All right. And I think that this has changed. They've actually added the helicopter pad here. But one thing it kind of stuck out to me, so I wanted to talk about what this is and what it some of the questions. All right, so here we're going back. Homestead 2, they put 50,000 gallons of water in with tracer dye, and it went out within 15 minutes after they filled it up. And they never found the source. And so they brought in an excavator, and they dug a hole, or they dug out what the fill was. The fill, was trees and grass and whatnot. And they got down to a clay layer, and they said they dug down 16 feet, according to Dr. Travis. Okay, so my question was, all right, so you guys, you dug down 16 feet. Why didn't you repeat the experiment? Fill it back up with water with more tracer dye and do it again. I mean, that would be you repeat the experiment because you filled it with water, you put tracer dye, you couldn't find it. You dug a hole. Why didn't you fill it back up with water and put more tracer dye and watch it? Because now you don't have any obstruction. You could see where the frickin' water's going. I mean, was it below 16 feet or was it above 16 feet? You didn't answer that question. I would have. That's one thing I would have done is where the heck did the water go? Was it below 16 feet or above 16 feet? If it's below 16 feet, you dig deeper. Yeah. Right? Kind of. The other thing, I guess, when they were digging that, this is from last week, but you remember the guy Caleb and he had the crazy phone, the phone that was just doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And here's the clue is that the crazy phone was not the first time that Caleb's phone was crazy. You heard Travis say, oh, or not Travis, but Tom say, well, that exact phone did that before. Well, okay. Take that man, Caleb. He's got a cracked phone. He needs a new phone. Take him into town, take him to the T-Mobile store and get him a new phone. A brand new iPhone 12. Get him an iPhone 12, and repeat that experiment. Does his phone still go crazy with a brand new iPhone? If not, his other phone was frickin' nuts because it was defective. Case closed on that one. All right, next. Question. Okay, so at the end of, or at the beginning of this episode 2, all right, season 2, episode 2, they're having a phone conversation with Brandon Fugel. Brandon is, I don't want to put the guy off, he is a very successful real estate developer, and that is what he does. He develops real estate, and he's in Utah, and he's one of those people who's very successful in the Utah sphere of real estate. So they're relating the story about them sitting at a picnic table late at night, and they hear some noise. Caleb brings up his pistol, his handgun, with a light, and they go walk in searching for the source of the noise. They turn a corner. Both Caleb and Dr. Travis both see an anomalous phenomena, a something. When they shine the light on it, it vanishes. Now on the phone, Brandon Fugel, who is a real estate developer, says, oh, so they must have stealth technology. Brandon, piece of advice, and I saw it on Travis's face, do not assume anything. Yeah, it could be stealth technology. It could be interdimensional. It could be, we're talking about interdimensional portals, and there's a history of interdimensional phenomena that are reported to have appeared on the ranch. Do not assume it's stealth. Do not assume it's a thing. It could be something else, and it couldn't, and it could be something other than interdimensional. There are technologies of, all right, think about this. I'm just saying don't assume it's what you think it is, because don't think in terms of our technology. You got to think in terms of technology elsewhere. Flight of the Navigator, I think, represented what I'm about to say very succinctly. Is you're inside a UFO, all right? The UFO appears to be a physical thing, all right? It has a fuselage. It has a body that appears to be metallic. But when you're inside the UFO, the metal you can see through transparently, all right? So you can see your surroundings. It's like you're looking out from liquid, it's a portal. So yeah, it's physical, but you can see through it. It's transparent. Okay, so Travis said that he saw something that was rectangular that was glowing a color. So it gave off some vibrational light emanation. And when they shone a light on it, the light reflected back off of it and then it disappeared. I think what you're seeing there, maybe, could be stealth technology, could be interdimensional technology, could be a way of viewing something remotely. So if we want to say a remote camera, how do we know? Because you could have a way of viewing the environment. Okay, somebody's spying on you, Travis. You're eating a hamburger at your picnic table, and somebody's watching you eat your hamburger, and they're listening in on your conversation via a rectangular portal. I wouldn't say an interdimensional portal, but it's some technology that we are not aware of, and they're watching you in real time. And when you investigate and shine a light and they say, oh shit, turn it off, boom, and then it goes away. Could you do that? Could you imagine someone opening up a camera viewer at a remote location and viewing someone doing something remotely? I could. If I'm thinking a million years ahead in the future, I don't know. I don't want to assume anything. Stealth technology, I think, is a little bit more advanced than stealth technology, Brandon, is something a lot more advanced. Next is the dead cow. All right. Here, let me show you this. Here's a dead cow. I don't know why my browser keeps doing that. Here's a dead cow that was found a week ago. Now, this is very recent. This picture that you're looking at right here is from a week ago in Central Oregon. This is on the eastern side of the Cascade Range between Bend, Oregon, and I believe it's, well, east of there. I forget the name of the damn city. But that's where the cow is found. There's no sign of blood. It looks very much like the phenomena that has been reported on Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know the particulars. I would love to hear Linda Moulton Howe's analysis of this. I wonder if she is investigating, because this is only a week old in Oregon. And I wonder if Linda Moulton Howe already has interviewed the people, the ranchers who own this cow or owned this cow, this dead cow. I mean, wouldn't you like to know? And then we talk about, the ranch family that is terrorized by unknown forces. Unknown forces. And I think that's the thing, when we talk about the Skinwalker Ranch, we're talking about unknown things. I mean, we don't know what they are. And here you are, you're dealing with, your mind jumps to the, oh, it must be aliens. No, maybe not. Petroglyphs on the rocks. All right, so the team has found supposedly petroglyphs that were punched or scraped or marked on a rock on a mesa, on a side of a mesa. A question, you don't know if those are original petroglyphs. Can you date them? If they're there, are there other petroglyphs that resemble these petroglyphs? I mean, we had a doctor on this show. But again, it's a scripted show. The doctor was an archaeologist and specifically pays attention to the mythology, the glyphography of Native Americans in the area. The question in my mind, do these resemble petroglyphs of other areas of the same tribe? The Ute Indians. Are there other markings on other rocks nearby or in a similar manner? Not necessarily nearby, but by the same tribe. It would be an open question in my mind. I'm not an expert in that, but I would ask that doctor, you know, what would you look for of a similar nature to verify? Because you'd have to say, were these created hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago? Or were they created 10 years ago by some guy who was walking on the mesa and thought it'd be cool to tap in, you know, I'm sorry, but not going to put it past some people who may have an ulterior motive to create sensationalism. And it's like someone creating a document about a young son of a prominent politician that alleges the son evaded the draft and became a fighter pilot and did not go to Vietnam because they were in the National Guard. They had special considerations. And I'm speaking specifically about Dan Rather fabricating documents about George W. Bush. I wouldn't put it past somebody to create something false in order to create a narrative that they want to push. Who created those petroglyphs? Are they modern creations? How can you tell, or can you tell when they're created? Because if you cannot verify, if you cannot validate the actual creative origin of those petroglyphs, you should ignore them. That's from me to the Skinwalker people. If you're really interested in the truth, and if you can't date those things, don't pay attention to them because they ain't important. You can't date them. They're not scientifically viable information unless you can date them, unless you can verify that they came from the Ute tribe that also did similar petroglyphs somewhere else in the area. Then no, not believable. Sorry. That was my note on that. Next, Mr. Hicks, Mr. Junior Hicks. Tonight they talked about him as a science teacher who independently investigated phenomena in the area. And I have to give credit to the guy for over how many decades he did that. 40 decades, I think they said. A science teacher took it upon himself that whenever there was a report, he interviewed people. And, well, he interviewed people and he did a statistical analysis of that. When they occurred, what time of day, size, position, all that kind of stuff. That is like a gold mine of information. And I really like the idea that if this is an actual show and they're actually showing real information and taking that stuff and then putting it into a database and extrapolating and aligning, current information while they're doing real-time analysis of electromagnetic or radiation or RMF or RF or frequencies that are odd, out of place. Be really interesting to correlate real-time data with historical analysis of statistical data given by Mr. Junior Hicks. I think that's cool. And it also reminds me of another guy. You remember Finding Bigfoot, another, history, or wasn't History Channel, I guess is Learning Channel, but Finding Bigfoot, Discovery Channel. uh, Brackman, what's his name? Cliff Brackman on Finding Bigfoot. He was a science teacher as well. And I think it really speaks highly of science teachers, especially middle school, high school science teachers, that actually take it upon themselves to investigate things that they're interested in, whether it's Bigfoot. Hey, Bigfoot. I got Bigfoot on my shirt tonight. But whether it's Bigfoot or something else, and somebody wrote something and says there are scientific ways to date them. Okay, then let's date them. If there are scientific ways to date them, then date them. And I agree with you, but they didn't show that tonight. They didn't ask that question. Can you date them? Can you? I mean, it's not carbon dating, right? It would have to be looking at those pics, right? I mean, yeah, I agree. You'd have to date them, but they didn't even discuss it. They didn't even go there. So to me, that's, if you can't date them, disregard them. If you can date them, then date them. Verify them. And that's my point. Validate the data. If you can date them, validate the data. Put them in a context of when they were created. 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. We don't know. They didn't date them. That's my point. Date them. And if you can't, disregard it. That's all I'm saying. What else? I wrote a note about what I've been doing is taking these 3x5 cards, and I was watching the show, and questions that came to my mind, and I was writing them down. And one of the questions was about, they had that book that was open, that showed all of a analysis of long-term stuff, long-term interviews and correlating events that may have be important, right? And taking that and putting it in a data set. And the question that came to my mind is, because you have all of this data from a data set, and one of the things, I mean, science has to be repeatable. It has to be falsifiable. You have to, I mean, there are certain things that make science good science. And I don't want to question Mr. Junior Hicks as a science teacher, but I would like to know, because this is over decades, 3 or 4 decades of data that he collected, and seeing, or was he consistent in the collection of that data? That would be the other, because it is a large data set. I'd like to know, was he consistent in the collection of that data? Because if there are inconsistencies in the collection of the data, then that calls into question the validity of the data itself as a science statistical analysis. And you have to be somewhat consistent in that regard. So what else? What? Somebody said something else. I have to go over here and read this, so I apologize. I got my glasses on. I'm like, reading these shows are purely entertaining. Exactly. That's my point. It's purely entertainment, and it's built up to get you involved in it. But I think Skinwalker Ranch is unique. Finding Bigfoot, they never found Bigfoot, man. But yes, it's all entertainment. It's all scripted. I know that. But Skinwalker Ranch is unique. Skinwalker Ranch and that area, I would say, has been the subject of phenomena. I mean, the Ute Indian tribe, it's documented, the Ute Indian tribe, just their oral history. And yes, there are other petroglyphs about skinwalkers. If you talk to the shaman of the Native Americans about skinwalkers, especially in the Navajo, not only the Ute, the Navajo have similar stories of skinwalkers. The skinwalker is thought to be evil, to put it mildly. But they call them skinwalkers because they're what we would call them shapeshifters. It is something that purports to be something that it is not. And yes, these shows, they seek to gain viewers so they can sell advertising, just like YouTube. I mean, they want to show shows that, whether it's Mr. Beast or Casey Neistat, they want to have viewers, a lot of viewers viewing it so they can sell advertising. It's no different than the History Channel or the Discovery Networks. But Skinwalker Ranch, because of its history, the history of Skinwalker Ranch predates History Channel. All right. And you can go back and look at stories in newspapers in the area that there have been anomalous. I mean, Mr. Junior Hicks collected data for over 40 years in this area. Predates Skinwalker Ranch, the phenomena of Skinwalker Ranch. And yeah, I think they blow it up and they put all this hype on it. And Mr. Brandon Fuchs is, the Fugel. Mr. Brandon Fugel, who owns Skinwalker Ranch today, is a real estate developer. He's not running it as a ranch. He's running it, he's increasing the value because of the mystique of the ranch. Yeah, I get it. But why did the Pentagon fund Bruce Bigelow? And why did Bruce Bigelow build those livestock containers? I showed you that earlier. Let me get back. Here, let me go. This. Why did Bruce Bigelow build 2 of these on the property? Because they were studying cattle mutilations and they wanted to have eyes on in a controlled experiment, a controlled environment. They have 2 of these on the property. I agree. The show itself is meant to entertain, and but it's also meant, that's why I'm having this reaction video, because I think it's kind of cool to ask the question, could there be something real at this property that has something that is unexplained? Because I live about an hour away from some place called Enchanted Rock, which is the largest monolithic rock in North America. It is a huge, huge rock. They call it the Llano Uplift. All right, it's a granite rock that is a huge boulder, and it's called Enchanted Rock because when it heats up, the sun's shining on it on the day, it heats up. And when the sun goes down, it cools down. And when the sun goes down, this rock emanates sounds. Right? It's like crying, a woman crying in the middle of the night. There is, because of the expansion and contraction of this granite rock, it's solid granite rock. And because it expands and contracts, there is a crevice that has become more or less, it's called a cave, but it's actually a walkway. You can go through this enchanted rock. And it's been that way for hundreds of years that you can walk through this rock. The legend is that on those nights when the woman is crying, the granite rock is making sounds because it's contracting and expanding. So at night, it's cooling down, contracting, it's making sounds. You go through that, and the legend is you go through it at certain times. Tonight is a super full moon tonight, right? Okay, so tonight would be one of those nights. You go walking through the Enchanted Rock, through this tunnel. The legend is when you get to the other side, you will be someplace else. Do they mean a different reality, or do they mean a different time? The Indian legend is someplace else. Meaning you're not in the same place. You're not in the same reality as you are. That's the legend of the Enchanted Rock, and that's why it's called the Enchanted Rock. And there are many legends of the Enchanted Rock. I mean, there was Comanche and Apache inhabited the area here of Central Texas, and there were a tribe that had lived in the area of the Enchanted Rock, and it's a really tall, I mean, it's a huge rock. And they were being attacked by a neighboring tribe. Apache were attacking Comanche, and the Comanche sought refuge on the top of the Enchanted Rock. I mean, that's where they held off the Apache, and they all died. They jumped off the rock rather than, submit to the Apache, because the Apache would have enslaved them, because the Apache believed in slaves. They took slaves when they conquered people. The Comanche jumped off. And it is thought, in addition to the woman crying, that the Enchanted Rock is, well, there is a warrior tribe of Comanche Indians that protect the innocent when they seek refuge on the Enchanted Rock. That's the legend. Which, there is a Captain, what's his name? Captain Hayes, Hayes County. Captain Hayes was a Texas Ranger, and he was searching for gold in what's now Hayes County, named after him. But he was searching for gold, and he was attacked by some Apache. And he ran up the Enchanted Rock. He climbed up the Enchanted Rock and was fighting off the Apache. After 3 days, the Apache gave up and left. It is said by Captain Hayes that he was assisted in his fight by supernatural forces. And some people say, well, those must have been the Comanche Indians fighting the Apache on his behalf. There are things in the world that we don't know. There, how can you say that there are? Why did Bruce Bigelow build these things? I mean, seriously. Why did Bruce Bigelow build these? There's 2 of them that I found on the property using Google Earth. One to the west and one to the east of Homestead 2, in the field where you would normally put cattle to graze. I think it's an interesting question. Yeah, and I it's something that's fun to think about, to consider the alternative, to think about something that could be real and not discount it, not out of hand because we don't understand it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, that's like if a person living eons ago, thousands of years ago, saw, maybe say, ancient aliens, okay? Ancient aliens coming down. How would you describe an ancient alien? Would you describe it like they do in the Bible of Ezekiel, saying a wheel within a wheel? Can you discount that? Because you don't have the vocabulary, you don't have the knowledge to explain something that's happening. Brandon Fugue calls it stealth technology. It disappeared. Well, maybe it wasn't stealth technology. Maybe it was somebody using a technology from viewing something in real time from someplace else or some time else. An interdimensional thing. Who knows? We don't. And I have to read this. I'm sorry. I'm going to go up here again. I'm going to read this and go. How are the cattle mutilated? Let me go back to this picture here. All right. Again, this cattle is from Oregon. And this was within a week or 2. And you look at this cow and you say, how's a cattle mutilated? Well, it's dead, one. It died suddenly. It's like it was all of its life, I mean, it's 98% water, just like we are, sucked out of it. No blood, no predatory tracks. There's nothing to indicate that it was eaten. And this one, I don't know. That's why I say I'd like to know if Linda Moulton Howe has already interviewed the ranchers of this particular beast. Has maybe like read that and find out. I mean, in the past, cattles were mutilated with, missing eye sockets. Their anuses were, like they were cauterized flesh that was pulled out. Strange. And if it were the government mutilating these animals, it's against the law, folks. It's a felony because you can't take someone's property without compensation. So I don't think it was the United States military doing this. It doesn't seem like it's a predator because a predator would eat it. It's something else. And you have to ask, okay, what's the purpose of cattle mutilation? I don't know. I'm not an alien. But it's intriguing to ask the question because it is a phenomena that happens. I mean, there are cattle mutilations. Go to Linda Moulton. She is an award-winning journalist who actually investigates this stuff and asks those questions. When did it happen? How did it happen? When did you notice it? It happened last night. There is a being that does that. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe. The chupacabra? I don't know. I mean, can we say for certainty that a cattle mutilation exists because a being eats it? I don't know. Or is it because of the nature, when you read Linda Moulton Howe's pieces about cattle mutilations and about tongues being excised out of the mouth, about eyes being excised out of the skull, about the anus organ, the whole anal cavity being excised, about the abdominal cavity being excised, cauterized, like a laser cut it out, I'd have to say it's not a being doing that. It is something that is doing it part of a scientific study. I mean, here we are. We're living in an age when we have F-18 pilots capturing tic-tac UFOs off the West Coast and spindle-top UFOs off the East Coast. I don't think it's one of three possibilities, right? They're either foreign technology, they are United States technology, they're our own technology, or they are something else. I don't think our adversaries have that kind of technology. They don't. I don't think that we might, just because Admiral Rickover, back in the 1980s, when he was asked about anti-gravity, his denial was, I can't talk about that. That's classified. That's a polite way of saying, yeah. But, could it be a chupacabra? Yeah. Chupacabra is, Puerto Rico, South America. Chupacabra is, there are instances or people report the chupacabra in South Texas, like the javelina. It's sort of like a Bigfoot. You can say a chupacabra exists, but until you find one, no. Bigfoot exists until you find one? No. I mean, if we're going to use science as our bar of veracity, of talking about Skinwalker Ranch and about the things that happen on Skinwalker Ranch and doing it in a scientific way, It has to be repeatable. It has to be falsifiable. It has to have all those scientific attributes about science. You have to have something that you can test. And you have to have something that you can test and repeat it and verify the test and falsify the test. If you cannot prove that something's false, then it's not a valid test. That's why I have problems with some people who talk about climate change, but that's another subject. You have to be able to test it. It's more than just looking at a dead cow on the ground and saying, hey, that dead cow died of something. Yeah, what did it die of? I don't know. But the chupacabra, it's a myth, a legend, and you could say that. But then again, I go back to this. Why did Bruce Bigelow build these compounds? And they still had cows, chupacabra or not, they still had cows that were found emaciated, their fluids, their body fluids taken out of them. And apparently things happened in this compound or these compounds on Skinwalker Ranch that have yet to be explained. I think it's an interesting thing. I'm not saying that it exists either. I just don't know. I mean, and every legend or every myth has its root is a kernel of truth. It's like Bigfoot, right? Bigfoot is not something that was just seen in the 1940s by some guy in California who saw big feet. I have a great uncle, 1772. The Shawnee gave him a name because he was a really large man, Thomas Spencer in Tennessee. They have Spencer County, Tennessee named after him. He was a frontiersman, and he walked along the banks of the Ohio River in bare feet. And he was so large, he was a rather large man for his time. The Indians, the Shawnee, gave him the name of Bigfoot. Hey, Bigfoot Spencer. You can look it up. He's in Tennessee. Thomas Bigfoot Spencer. That's my relative. But they called him Bigfoot not because he had big feet, because he had big feet akin to a legend of the Ohio Grassman, which we call Bigfoot. Another name for Bigfoot. I think it's an interesting. People would say we discount that because you're crazy, you're nuts. I don't. I think I'd like to have an open mind and say something can be true just because we don't have proof of it. And that maybe that's on me, is saying, you cannot say, it's like Brandon Fugue saying, oh, that rectangular thing must have stealth technology. No. It could have a technology that we are not aware of. There could be animals, and if there is a Bigfoot that exists, it's a primate, an advanced thinker. Maybe it lives underground. Maybe it buries its dead. We haven't found a dead body of a Bigfoot because they bury their dead. Maybe. I don't know. And Chupacabra, there are legends of things that we don't know that exist, that may exist. Do ghosts exist? I think that there is scientific evidence to suggest that there is something that survives death, right? All of this, I think, is kind of esoteric. But at the same time, in the larger picture of the world and where this exists, I mean, how can we say that it doesn't exist? Anyhow, I've probably gone on. I'm almost an hour into this, so maybe I ought to close it up with that. Because I wanted to talk about Skinwalker Ranch and about the weirdness of Skinwalker Ranch and the portrayal of Skinwalker Ranch on the Discovery Networks and the I think it's the History Channel. And what does it mean? It's not really I wish they'd put it in the realm of history, because the entire area here in this region of Utah is very it has a lot of legends and it has a lot of historical roots about why these things exist. So with that, this is my second time of trying this live show and trying to do a live stream. So I appreciate your patience with me. I'm trying to learn this and talking about stuff that frankly is I just find it interesting. It's kind of cool to think about what if, to think about things that might be and how they relate to us. Anyhow, I appreciate you watching. Leave me a comment if you think I can do something better. I'm open, and I appreciate you, and see you later. Bye-bye.